So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is day one of the African IGF, the virtual African IGF 2020. We are starting day one now with a very interesting session. We have list of experts, renowned experts on ICT, and we are happy to have them with us today. Our panel is the challenges of internet governance during and post COVID-19, which is going to be moderated by Mr. Mokhtar Yadali, the head of Information Society Division within the African Union Commission. Mokhtar Yadali, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Adil, very much, and welcome to everybody. Our sincere apology for the delays, but as Adil mentioned, we are some of the people are really far away. And my special thanks to Dr. Sharif, who is actually currently in the US, and it is around 4 a.m. in the morning. But thank you for all for being here. I am very humbled by the privilege given to me to moderate this session with such prominent experts as Adil mentioned. The session is on internet governance issues, and there are thousands of internet government-related issues, but we couldn't talk about them all. We picked a few of them, and around 5 or 6 that are actually really in of common interest, specifically in the context of the COVID-19. Our experts, most of them are very known to you, and I will let them introduce themselves. Most of them are still very active in the internet governance domains, and most of them have been contributing somehow in the WSIS process. And for those who actually, young people just joining these internet governance processes, the Internet Governance Forum was born from the WSIS processes. And the WSIS processes is one of the proposals done by the Africans in 1998, when internet was just coming, and most of the telecom engineers were very confused by the new concept of ICTs, and by the way, internet was coming to us as a civilians thanks to the perseverance of Vice President Al Gore, which was a young senator from Missouri, who actually really pushed for the internet to be given to the public. So the telecom engineers from Africa during the ITU plenipotentiary in 1998 in Minneapolis proposed to have a summit dedicated to the new communication and information technology context, and hence the WSIS has come in, and hence it started in Geneva and ended up again in Africa, in Tunisia, in Africa again. So you see how Africans are really contributing to this process. And the reason I am saying this, because I recently learned something very important, that history is not really about what happened. It's about who and how have told the story itself about what happened. So we need to make sure that the record of history is really recording the fact that Africans have been really contributed to that. Now, as I said at the beginning, there are many issues related to internet, and some of them are related to the policy and regulation, some of them are related to the inclusiveness, some of them as the affordability, some of them are related to the new debate on how ICT will be used for digital transformation and so on. Now, today we have 3 so far. If I am not mistaken, we have so far only 3 out of the 7 panelists who would have. We have Dr. Sharif, we have Hussan, Engineer Hussan, and we have Jean-Paul. I hope I didn't forget anybody from the panelists, because I didn't see any other names. Could you confirm that for me, Adil, please?
Keith.
And Keith.
Yeah.
Keith representing youth. So my first question then will be really given to Hussam Al Gamal. The question is related to how meaningful and affordable access to the internet has becoming one of the sine qua non condition of human development. Could you please, Engineer Hussam, could you please tell me exactly what are the thoughts and plans of the African private sector to overcome these inequality with regard to access to internet? Over to you, Hussam. Please, could you please just briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Mukhtar. My name is Hussam Al Gamal. I used to be till yesterday the chairman of AFICTA. Now there is a new chairman who used to be the vice chair, Tabu, and I'm the CEO of a company called ICANN that works in Industry 4 and in digital security. And I have been participating in the different venues related to internet governance over the last at least 8 years, being part of the MAC for 3 years, executive member of the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce BASIS, Business Alliance to Support Information Society. And I had, for a short period of time, for 2.5 years, a governmental role, being the head of the Information and Decision Support Center of the Egyptian Cabinet. So a little bit of a blend between private and public sector, currently just private sector. So this is for my introduction. Now, to answer briefly your question, I'll say that we have, maybe I have 3 points to raise. First of all, the importance of the internet and access. Yesterday, during our AFICTA summit, we were just discussing the relation between the internet, ICT, and the SDGs. And we discovered that maybe 15 out of the 17 SDGs are somehow enabled by using ICT and internet access. When we talk about poverty, when we talk about hunger, when we talk about education, when we talk about availability, sustainability of water and sanitary for all, when we talk about energy, inclusiveness, inequality, climate change, we touch in a lot of those areas that are enabled through ICT, because it is only by using proper data gathering, consolidation, analysis, and some artificial intelligence that we are able really to take and make proper decision. So we become much more efficient in the way we are serving citizens around. We can cater better with programs serving inequality, serving sustainability. We can have better predictive maintenance for machineries. We can have better agriculture results and all of that. So just to this is just to make sure that it is really important, not just to have better communication, but to have a better life and to achieve our SDGs. Now, coming back to your question, I would say that the African private sector, in order to be able to plan properly and to be more active in investing in access, I think we first need to make sure that we have much more consolidated African access, data sharing, privacy, and cybersecurity policies. We need to have much more information availability regarding different African countries' access and digital infrastructure projects. We need to have more clarity about international funds availability to support digital infrastructure and capacity building in African countries.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have more availability of information about financial and digital inclusion national projects, and need to have ability to transfer in and out investments and returns with available proper transfer rates. Those are very important to enable more the private sector to act better and in confidence in a sustainable way to serve digital transformation in Africa. I want just to confirm again that in order to have a real good digital transformation, we need to have a great access for all, and we need to have a proper transformational capacity building program for all. Now, for the African private sector, we can invest, and currently it is happening, but we need more of that. We need to invest more in fiber optics manufacturing, for example, because access is based on connectivity. And why don't we own our own capability in doing so, not just as a contractor, but also as a manufacturer? So investing in fiber optics manufacturing is important. We currently in Egypt are starting to invest in one big factory, but I think we need more of this around Africa. We need also to invest in communication towers manufacturing. Because again, without having at a good cost proper infrastructure, we cannot have proper access. We need to consolidate digital infrastructure implementation capabilities of private sector. As many of you know that mobile operators now can be, we have direct connectivity and we have mobile operator connectivity, which do really help in reaching more rural areas. But in fact, in some places, because of the scarcity of the people around, private sector is reluctant to invest in towers and all of that in those areas. And the best way of doing so is to have agreements so that different operators act together in such capex investment and benefit together, each for his own group of people acting on. And finally, I think it is important to encourage in all our nations, African nations, to have PPP projects, private-public partnership projects, to identify them properly, to identify the return of them on the investment, because there is really good return on digital infrastructure and data centers investment in Africa. But this needs to be highlighted further so that we can really go together and invest in such opportunities. Also, and finally, I think it is important to think about potential joint investment in localized content, especially serving education, because education is a major area, and especially when we have seen during COVID-19, it showed that people having access and having content were much able to serve their youngsters around and not just keep them at home without any proper education. I just finished my part and looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for bringing this perspective from the private sector for an affordable and meaningful access, which actually can summarize into two: investment on infrastructure and specifically sharing also that infrastructure. Now, COVID-19, as you mentioned, has brought some inequalities with regard to the access. I am sure the young people have suffered of that. They were not able to afford access. They were not able to continue their transactions, studies, and their businesses. I will just then ask the question to Keith. How, Keith, did you feel that, how have you felt this inequality? Would give us some concrete example on how impactful was this COVID-19 on access and business continuity. Over to you, Keith, please.
Thank you very much, Mukhtar, for this wonderful opportunity to allow me to give my perspectives on accessibility and affordability of internet, representing the young people's perspective. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Keith Andere. I serve as the Director of Programs at the Africa Youth Commission. But specifically in this context, speaking on internet governance space, I am an alumnus of the Kenya School of Internet Governance, which actually has demonstrated the capacity building process that today enables me to sit here and articulate these issues very, very well. I sit here as a MAG member of the Africa IGF, representing the young people in that context. And before we started this session, we actually had our own organization of young people within the internet governance context. And we had a very successful youth IGF on the 24th. And this is in support of the Africa Union, is in support of PRIDA, is in support of many colleagues who are here today, just, putting young people at the forefront of this. And we can do this together. I'm just asking you to come in on board, and this is a vital process for us to continue and take our rightful place in such tables. So join me today as I give my perspective on the African youth. So Mukhtar, to answer your question, I'll take 3 or 4 angles to it. First, I'll give context, and then I'll look at some of the challenges that has come about during this COVID process. And then I'll look at some opportunities and the role young people have been playing. And finally, what is needed and my recommendations as we go forward. So because I'm talking about accessibility and affordability, I'll first of all want to expound on this and want to help all of us who are listening here today on the reason why we are talking about accessibility and affordability. It means it's non-existent. And in whose lens are we talking about accessibility? In whose lens are we seeing the affordability cost of it? For me, in an African context, we are looking at the majority. And there's no any other way of putting this other than recognizing what various statistics and reports and reality has shown us, that the majority of the African population is the young people. But we see the young people continue to be excluded. These young people are facing a lot of exclusion in terms of the highest number of unemployment. So that speaks to economic empowerment. That speaks to governance processes and political structures and even other social structures. So we are seeing young people already, even before COVID, being excluded to some of these important processes and decision-making processes. So out of that, again, I would like to say that within that context, youth are not homogeneous. We cannot be all put in one basket called youth. We all have different aspects and dynamics of youth. We have, youth in rural areas. We have youth who are not illiterate. We have youth who dropped out of education system. We have youth who went, educated but not employed. We have youth in business, and we have various other sectors. Young people with disability who also face different aspects of exclusion. So what COVID has actually brought to us, it has defined again, and if anything, expanded this already exclusion and gaps that were already there. For example, the people who benefited most out of all this COVID scenario are those who had access to internet. And access here could be one, reliable internet connection. And 2, we see that even those close to the cities, some of them actually suffered because you didn't have enough sustainable data to actually translate into work, into something quality. Some of these were unable to sustain, the adoption methodologies that we're having, like being on Zoom for 30 minutes takes a lot of data. So we see a lot of, this inequality from the unconnected, underserved areas. The digital illiteracy played a very big role in this, inequality. Cost of data, again, as I've said, reliable supporting infrastructure has actually played a very critical role, Mukhtar. As my previous colleague has spoken, internet in itself is not a standalone, infrastructure. We need to rely on other supporting infrastructure. For example, electricity, security. These are other dimensions that we actually see in terms of, looking at terrorist groups and other, organized crime targeting communication equipments. And that compromises, the cost of the internet. Taxation still plays a very big role. And I hope that, we can push very strong recommendations out of this that speaks to taxation. And for me, taxation here speaks to the internet itself. We're already seeing many governments across the continent trying to tax the ISP more heavily for use of internet. Even at home, residential internet packages are being taxed. Yet these are the same governments that are pushing people to work from home and, and maintain social distance. So with these realities, taxation still remain a very critical aspect to look at it, and taxation also for digital devices. It is an irony that internet is perceived to be a basic human right as declared by the UN in 2016, but in 2020, 5 years down the line, the devices that we use to connect to that which gives us a basic human right is considered luxurious, So it's taxed very heavily. And out of that, very low-cost mobile devices that are coming to sort of bridge that gap don't have the capacity to sustain what we need. For example, memory is a challenge, So we are not able to even have some of these key applications that actually enable us to do what COVID has positioned us as to do. But looking at some of the role of what the young people have played, we've seen young people, during this pandemic playing a very central role in terms of finding creative ways to raise awareness about the pandemic itself. There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation and different myths about the COVID-19. So young people played a very critical role in terms of passing down the right information and also doing digital literacy to their colleagues, to their friends, onboarding them onto the digital service deliveries. Now we're seeing a lot of government service delivery being offered digitally. But that also brings another aspect of inequality, of which I call digital illiteracy tax. I call it digital illiteracy tax because of your illiteracy to engage on a digital platform and government services, which are very basic. Like, for example, my grandmother who sits in a village somewhere in Bungoma in rural Kenya, if she needs to have her ID replaced, she needs to go online and fill an e-citizen government platform. But because she's not technologically savvy, she will probably go into an internet cafe where she will be charged an arm and a leg just to access a free government service. And that's what I call a digital illiteracy tax, which you've seen very high in already excluded people. So just to move forward very quickly as I finish, what is needed? Supporting environment, and supporting environment here is from legislation, from taxation, from political will, from cooperation. We need to see a lot of collaboration and working together. As my colleague has said, this decade going forward is a decade of digital transformation and use of digital methodology to actually realize two critical agendas, 2030 and 2023. Thank you very much. I think I'll come back later.
Yes, thank you very much. That was actually very, very wonderful in answering to the question. And as I said at the forum the other day, the future of Africa and the destiny of Africa is what the youth will do with it. So your education, your empowerment, the right policy for you to access is actually a key. And you mentioned the issue of digitalization, and this is a very good trampoline to go to the next question or next issue I will be trying to answer to for the sake of our participant. The digitalization has come to Africa, whether we call jelly for it or not. It is here, and we cannot do anything about it. So, but it is coming with technology that's coming from elsewhere. It's coming from rules and regulation that's coming from somewhere. And the issue of digital sovereignty is now being on the table. I would like to invite Jean-Paul Adams not only to introduce himself as a first comer to our as the first time to come to our forum, but also as somebody who is working at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, that is really a body that is helping and assisting the continent very well, to tell us what is being done really to bring digital sovereignty in the continent and among the African member state of the UNECA. Jean-Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mokhtar, and good morning from Addis, good afternoon, depending, or very early morning, depending on where you are joining from. Firstly, I would like to really thank the African Union Commission and all the partners for the exemplary partnership that we have around internet governance, and particularly around ensuring inclusion more widely around the issues of digital transformations. And the question of digital sovereignty is absolutely crucial for us to be able to empower African countries. And the work that the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa is doing is really about supporting the African states, and supporting the African states starts at the level of the individual. Sorry, I forgot to perhaps just introduce myself a little bit more in detail. I am Jean-Paul Adam, and I'm the Director for the Technology, Climate Change and Natural Resources Division. Recently joined the United Nations earlier this year, and we look forward to continuing this partnership. So the role of the ECA in terms of digital sovereignty is focused first and foremost about the empowerment of the individual African citizen. By doing so, we can empower African states. And we're doing this through the establishment of the Center of Excellence on Digital ID, Digital Trade, and Digital Economy. The problem of identity in Africa is that the majority of Africa remains informal in terms of the organization of the economy, but also in terms of the services that African countries are able to offer to their citizens. And moving beyond this informality means reinforcing the digital identity for the citizen. We've already heard today about how the barriers for access to services are numerous. There's the problem of infrastructure. There is the problem of governance more widely. There is the problem of economic power, the ability to access internet data. In Africa, we know that the cost is often prohibitive. Generally, we would be hoping that the cost of data, for example, would be no more than 1 or 2% of income, and in some cases in Africa, it's up to 20%, and in average 7 to 8%, so it's much higher than in Europe, for example. And this is one of the issues that we need to address. The work that ECA is doing around digital identity is really fundamentally about the interaction between governments and citizens around access to digital services. We can better address the concerns of vulnerable members of society if we are including them in terms of the access to services and looking at that access in all of its aspects, meaning that from the basic level, we've heard from Keith about people who need to go into internet cafes, how we can support the access, for example, through the exceptional mobile access that has been developed in Africa recently, but still a lot of this mobile access is not through smartphones. So we need to look at the access at the base. How do people actually access the internet, and how do they access government services? We're also looking at the issues around biometric ID and how this is linked with digital services, and how this can be used to roll out better access to, for example, financial services, better access to health services. And we're seeing this in the COVID-19 crisis, a number of countries actually being very innovative in Africa in terms of offering services digitally, which previously were not available. And this is being done sometimes directly to citizens and sometimes through health outposts, but using, for example, mobile phones and using other infrastructure, but which depends, we've already noted, on the supporting infrastructure, whether it be fiber optic cable, whether it be access to electricity. All of these are fundamentals which need to be in place. Side by side with the support for the development of the digital ID across Africa, we are putting a lot of emphasis as well on the protection of personal data, and the link also in that protection at the personal level, but also in relation to national security levels. And this is about looking at the regulations, the legal environment that needs to be developed, and supporting as well the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity of 2014, the security guidelines for Africa, and the guidelines on privacy and personal data protection, which have been developed since 2018. We are strengthening the regulation guidance to support African countries that want to develop, particularly the private sector's participation in e-commerce platforms, as we believe that this will be a key part of the future development of Africa, and in particular harnessing the opportunities that exist through the African continental free trade area. In terms of inclusion, we must also recognize the challenges around ensuring the inclusivity around gender. We see even in today's panel, this is something we have to improve. But I do note that throughout the governance forum, I think there are a number of strong voices, strong female voices that will be speaking later today in various other panels. But we need to find the way to ensure that there is inclusion of women and girls at the basic levels in terms of access to education around digital opportunities. And one of the key things that ECA is doing is around our science, technology, and innovation platforms. We have forums that are being put together where we include boot camps, particularly targeting young women in terms of their access to, for example, coding, in terms of access to the areas such as artificial intelligence, and also digital platforms in terms of developing that across the African continent. So thank you very much for giving me the chance to share a few of these points around the work that ECA is doing. And just to reiterate that digital sovereignty in the context of Africa starts by empowering the individual, by looking at the digital identity of the individual. And by doing so, we can strengthen the framework for development in Africa and recovery to the COVID-19 pandemic by reinforcing that sovereignty. Thanks so much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. And again, welcome to our family. And we, as we said, we look forward to continue again working with you. So far, we have spoken about the meaningful and affordable access. We have talked about the impact on the youth, and we have talked about digital ID, but we haven't so far addressed the issue of the African presence in the international arena and how, because as you're certainly aware of, the issue of internet governance is not only regional or local, it is global. And many of the issues related to IG are being discussed within the framework of the United Nations. And there is no better specialist I can ask about this kind of activity than Dr. Sherif, who is an academician, but also specifically a prominent member of the African Union cybersecurity expert group. And he is one of our, how can I say, brain behind all those activities the AU is conducting within the framework of the United Nations. Dr. Sherif, could you please tell us what the group so far has discussed and how is the process within the United Nations related to the cybersecurity IGs being addressed within that context? Over to you, Sherif.
Thank you very much, Dean Mukhtar, for the introduction. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be here among friends that we have known for years. And I'm especially grateful that the topic itself is very timely for Africa. To give you a little bit of my background that is relevant to this, since I got my graduate degree from the US over 25 years ago, I joined my home country, Egypt, in a lot of regional, international efforts, as well as national efforts, including with the UNECA here, I have dear memories. In 25 years ago, Africa established an African Information Society initiative to bridge Africa and to bring Africa to the new age. 25 years ago. To tell you some perspective, especially for the youth who are among us here, in 1994, Egypt had an impressive 64 kilobit per second connection for the whole country. 64K, not 64 meg per second. And that was really the magnitude. Most of the issues that we discuss now were discussed there, but in a different perspective. Now I have in my home town of Cairo, I have a connectivity which is like 300 times as fast as the connectivity of the whole country 25 years ago. What Keith was just saying a few minutes ago, a digital divide that existed, and we talk about the digital gap 25 years ago. Now it's a different gap. Connectivity is totally different. There were solutions there. Africa started with the UN help, with the UN support, activities in the telecenters, community centers, and we were talking about affordability and many of the issues. I don't want to repeat what my colleagues on the panel just mentioned rightfully. I also participate in the WSIS 1 and WSIS 2. In WSIS 1, 2003, 2005, in Geneva and Tunisia. And many of these issues really were discussed at the global level. I'm currently working, with colleagues at the African Union Cybersecurity Expert Group on policies for Africa when it comes to cybersecurity. It is quite challenging, really, to have this rapid transformation that was caused by COVID. That is an opportunity, and at the same time is quite challenging for Africans if you don't have access. If we still are talking about policies to empower communities, and especially what Keith mentioned, we have discussed similar policies, Keith, like 20 years ago plus, about how African government need to realize that this transformation is the case. And then I still remember some of the resistance was, oh, well, this technology is for the elite, is for the more advanced, it is a luxury, it is not essential. It is hard to justify this type of really tardiness in really addressing these issues now when we see it is a matter of life, livelihood of African. It's in every aspect of our life. It is, again, the same thing I hear about cybersecurity, and working with my colleagues at the African Union Cybersecurity Expert Group. We discuss these policies. Cybersecurity is not an option. It's like a reality, and it is empowering. It is not an end result. It's empowering for various economic activities, for education. With this, I step back also. I'd like to mention a couple of things that are relevant. I chaired at the ITU, the Council Working Group for Child Online Protection for 7 years, between 2010 and 2017. We discussed the impact on children. And at the national level, I was privileged to have my dear colleague, Hussam El-Gamal, part of the national effort in Egypt. Again, protecting our children, our youth, using the technology was key in many policies. We need to, basically make sure that our African children are protected, that they are empowered at the early stage. The gender issue was mentioned. This is, again, this is something that we need to pride ourselves of, like in our universities, schools, from the early age, girls need to be empowered and to have the similar opportunity like boys, and moving forward. This has to be unified. The digital bridges need to be created across, and we need to have this partnership across different sectors. Empowerment is key. I'd like to focus on a couple of things that we addressed at the African Cybersecurity Expert Group. Also, having a policy, a unified policy, help establish really a common framework. When we established for Africa and African Information Society initiatives 25 years ago with the support of the ECA, it helped streamline some of the activities of the UN within Africa. Now we are at a different level. As I said, like the demands are different and the scope is quite different. I had the privilege of chairing the executive committee of the Supreme Cybersecurity Council in Egypt. Once we set a policy, and you try to lobby for this policy to be established at the highest level possible, and to get the empowerment that is really key to the success, you need to have the programs to really for capacity building, for developing indigenous solutions, so African solutions for Africa. Unfortunately, we are still, to a great extent, relying on solutions that are imported from outside. I remember the innovation that happened in Kenya, by the way, with the smart way of doing with electronic money, and many technologies that were developed for my time, like VSAT or others in Africa, that helped really push the envelope of technology. We need to do quite a bit more at the educational level, empowering partnerships with the private sector. Private sector own a significant part of the infrastructure, if not the majority of the infrastructure is owned and operated by the private sector. R&D capabilities is not an option for Africa. It is a reality. We have to have R&D in Africa to develop African solutions. Government shouldn't really have policies of heavy taxation when we are talking about rapid digitization, mobilizing and empowering society, communities. And this has to be really the norm, not the exception. So identifying best practices is what we are trying to focus on. Again, Mukhtar mentioned what was done through the group, the African Group on Cybersecurity. We're trying to look for best practices, to identify champions, to build bridges, to look at the UN when it comes to policies on cybersecurity. The UN established two levels of really communication and partnership. One of them is called the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts that was established since 2004, and with a renewed term, we had 6 UN GGEs. I had the privilege of representing my country in one of them and participated in another 2. And there is an open-ended working group that the UN established last year. I strongly support and encourage Africans to participate. When I participated in 2012, I was the only representative from Africa in the Middle East. So among 15 experts, only one representative representing over 60 countries. And I lobbied to expand the group, to open the group up, to have more voices. Fortunately, now we have 4 African countries participating. We have the open-ended group, working group, which include private sector, participate in policies. This is not a luxury. This is not only for government. This is for everybody. Because voices like Keith's voice, of course, Jean-Paul, I mean, it's really pleasure to meet you, to see what the UNECA is doing now. Hossam is a dear friend, and also he has been playing different roles. And Mukhtar, you are here, so African Union is represented as well. So we need this partnership to be empowering Africans. We need to make sure that the best practices are heard at the highest level. It is, not acceptable at this point to start talking only to experts at the expert level about policies that need to change. We need to lobby at the highest level of government, and we have an opportunity now with the rapid digitization to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So far, our prominent experts have brought light to some of the major issues that are part of internet governance. Number one is related to the meaningful and affordable access. Into that, we need to invest more and share on infrastructure, sharing our infrastructure. Number two, the youth need to be empowered, and we need to have the right policy for that. And specifically, we need to develop the literacy in the field of internet governance. And it is very important from the perspective of the UNECA to develop the digital ID for electronic transaction that will enhance the inclusion for e-commerce, for cybersecurity, for development of safety. And specifically, I like the perspective of gender that has been really brought to light. And you have come with those very good activity that are being conducted over at the international level. Now, I know that, Sherif, it is 4 a.m. in your place, but I don't want you to keep you awake. I don't want you to really sleep over by listening to others. I have been always thinking that all these issues we have discussed probably will continue to be discussed in different fora. It could be discussed in the Global Internet Governance Forum, will be discussed in the African Internet Governance Forum, will be discussed on different setups in terms of how to really have the Africa benefiting from the digital economy, from the internet governance issues and so on. However, as you mentioned, one of the fundamental things that is required to be to have Africa playing its fundamental roles and understanding issues of internet governance is to be part of the UN processes and the debate discussing the internet governance. Now, two schools are existing, and I'm summarizing this. One school is telling us, solve the issues of internet governance and you will be solving the issue of cybersecurity. And the other school is telling you, solve the issue of cybersecurity or will be solving the issues of internet governance. Did I formulate it very well? What is your perspective? I am asking you, what is your perspective? And any of the panelists would love to say something with regard to that. Please feel free. Sherif, over to you.
Thank you very much. Actually, cybersecurity for a long time was seen as a problem for the technology people. I mean, even at the organizational level. It's no longer the case. People, I mean, at the International Forum, last week we had a major cybersecurity event, which is the Forum for Incident Response and Security Teams. I was speaking there about, again, the partnership. Cybersecurity shouldn't be the problem of IT technical people. Shouldn't be about internet governance. It is a problem that a challenge that we need to mobilize the whole society to face. Because if we pose this as a technology problem, then I mean everybody would say that this is your problem. Go solve it. Cybersecurity starts with like child online protection, how to educate kids at the school level, how to educate communities about how to protect their privacy. To the digital rights is part of this. The transformation. The African Union is playing a significant role by having this special focus. The UN at different levels, at the highest level, as the UNGGE. This is a part of the first committee of the UN. This is the highest level that you can go for within the UN system. And we have channels within the open-ended working group or the UNGGE to provide feeds to the UN about these policies that would be endorsed by the states. The reports of the UNGGE were endorsed by the General Assembly of the United Nations, meaning the membership of the UN. All countries signed on the norms of conduct, on the confidence building measures. So it is, while these measures are voluntary measures, however, we need to promote them in Africa. We need to make sure that governments follow these norms. These norms would have really the basis. This is, I would say, a common starting point. It is not the end goal. This is the starting point for us to work in homogeneity. It is not the time really to discuss this in a technical perspective among technical people. It's a problem for the society. It's a challenge for the society. And the solution will come from the society through partnership. And we need to find African solutions for this. We shouldn't be waiting all the time for technologies to be imported, for skills to be imported into the country. There are lots of African professionals at different levels that can help out. I have seen this throughout my professional life, and they are willing to help, whether they live currently in Africa or they have been moving around, and it's a global society. So we can tap on African talents across the globe. And I think partnership is key, and I think IGF can play a significant role in that.
Thank you very much. Any thought with regard to this issue of African contribution to the global internet issues? Any, Hussam?
Yeah, I just had 2 points to raise. One of those is we starting seeing moving from the word cybersecurity to more digital security. Why? Because with the Industry 4 new technologies taking place, we are seeing more connectivities that are not using standard IP, but are using industrial IP and other things. So in healthcare, machineries in healthcare, machineries, CNC and PLCs in manufacturing and SCADA system, utilities management. And those are extremely important areas that are now more and more digitized. And why I'm highlighting this, because yet governments had not put norms for related digital security. And second, very few resources, experts are in those areas, especially in Africa. And those are really handling critical infrastructure and economy. And it is extremely important to shed light about those areas as well. Otherwise, countries may face blackouts. So it is important to include this among other things. And for this, I would come back to the suggestions that I've made in previous African IGF and in the international IGF. We need to think about moving from TRAs, Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, to DRAs, Digital Regulatory Authority. We need to think different in the way we need to encourage implementation, proper implementation in all sectors of digital transformation. And we need at the same time identify norms and frameworks where healthcare can work within those norms and not face problems. Otherwise, while we are encouraging more access and more use of digital transformation, we are also putting at risk those sectors. So it is extremely important to have this properly seen and supervised. I wouldn't say managed, but supervised. And for this, the one thing that is easily, that can be easily conducted, and it is extremely important, is that all countries in Africa need to really think and design and implement digital transformational capacity building programs, because it is moving into digital already. And while we have been different countries working a little bit on building some capacity in IT and in telecommunication, digital transformation is related to business segments. So people in healthcare need to understand how to use internet, digital tools, etc. Same in industry, same in commerce, same in agriculture. And people are going to lose jobs as we move into more digital. The only way to handle this is to have transformational programs to turn people into the new era and to know to learn them how to use the new digital tools as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any thought, Jean-Paul?
Yes, Mukhtar, I would like to jump on two comments here and just perhaps as reiterating.
Okay, go ahead.
Hassam had said. Thank you. One, as I just want to reiterate that, like my colleagues have said, digital transformation is the process to go, and cybersecurity is not about the technology, it's about the people, because the people is the weakest link in any security parameter. And for me, I come from the school of thought where I think if we fix internet governance, we are able then to address cybersecurity concerns. Because for me, cybersecurity is one of the many concerns within the internet governance conversations. You know, we need to look at the issues of privacy. We need to look at the issues
Keith,
of
you are very welcome to the open-ended group work. Keith, sorry to interrupt you, but with that last thought, I am welcoming you to the open-ended working group in the UN. All right. Jean-Paul, because we need to get some, yes, go ahead. Jean-Paul, please. Jean-Paul.
Yes, so sorry. So I struggle with the mute button sometimes. I'm so sorry about that. But generally, I think the issue about cybersecurity is a part of the wider conversation about empowerment of African citizens, because we need infrastructure and an ecosystem which allows people to function in all aspects of their lives and feeling secure. And that means that privacy frameworks have to be in place. It means that we also need the regulation to allow people to undertake secure e-commerce, for example. We've seen growth happen in the context of COVID-19, even within Africa, even if it has not been as strong as in other regions. But it is something which is emerging as an opportunity positively. And of course, as we increase access to the internet, as we increase access to electricity, which then gives the opportunity to increase people's access to the internet, we can see that growth of e-commerce happen. We are seeing that more and more trade is happening online. More and more people are turning to that opportunity, and they need to feel secure that their transactions are private and that their assets are also secure. So I think this is one of the fundamental enablers of the wider ecosystem for digital transformations in Africa, which we have to give attention to. And it starts by providing policy advice to African countries. And I think that's very much the space that ECA and the African Union and our partners are working in, to provide that support to African countries so that they have the framework that allows private sector investment to happen, and which also provides security and reassurance to the citizen. Thank you, and back to you.
I'm just handing it over to our online moderators if there is any questions coming. I don't see any questions. Oh, I see one on Q&A. There is a question coming from Grace Ikena. The question is, how really do we protect ourselves from internet fraudster? What policy is in place to check cybercrime? Cybersecurity has not really been harnessed in Africa. This is her humble opinion. Any comment on that? I see you have all of this say something with regard to that, but Sharif, in 2 sentences, please.
Yeah, first you need awareness at all levels, the general level about really what to do, what not to do, what type of things that are acceptable or not acceptable. We need to have a framework for the governments to have in terms of legislation. There is the Malabo Convention that the African Union established. Countries need to adopt this or adopt parts of it that would enhance the security. So awareness is important. Legislation is important, and solutions provided by Africans to support trust and security are needed.
Kate, any thought on that, please? Kate. Keith,
thank you very much.
Yes.
I just want to reiterate what
2 sentences.
I think my colleague has said it all. Yes, my colleague has said it all. Collaboration, awareness, and implementation of Malabo Convention. We still see low numbers in ratification of Malabo Convention.
Wonderful. Is there any other questions from the online? I don't see any on the chat. Is there anybody who wanted to ask a question to our panelists? I see no hands and I see no questions actually in the chat. We still have, I think, 5 minutes to go before closing this session. I just wanted to say something very important, that the subject we have tried to address is actually a very huge one, addressing issues related to internal governance, specifically in the context of COVID-19 and the current context of digitalization is a big challenge. We have spent an hour talking about great ideas and so on, and we haven't even taped to the smallest part of the things, because the challenge we are having now is even the definition what is cyberspace is being questioned. the borderless state or space that has been created by internet, the necessity for all of us to use the internet for our transformation is actually a big challenge for us as an African and for us as a global citizens in general. I believe you have addressed the issue of inequality. You have addressed the issue of the need for investment, the need for sharing infrastructure, the need for empowerment of youth, the need of empowerment of citizens. And I believe those are the major issues at this point of time to be addressed specifically for our survivability in the context of cyber security and in the context of new challenges, security challenges brought by the internet and the ICT application. I think you have done the great job.
Mukhtar,
yes.
I think
go ahead, Adil, please.
We still have 25 minutes.
I still have 25 minutes. I thought it was 5 minutes.
No, the session ends at 9:30.
Oh, then I summarized before the time. Wonderful. I thought it was 5 minutes. However, I would be glad to.
Can I ask a question, please, to the panel?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. Sorry about that.
To warm up the discussion and to start the discussion. So I think there is a lot of concern by civil society and even the citizenry regarding some regulation that have been introduced because of COVID-19. Even though they were introduced as a temporary regulation, but there is a concern that this regulation will continue down the road, and they are infringing into the privacies of citizens and all the applications that have been created and being used to trace and track individuals and so forth. What is it? I just need to hear from the panelists what they think about what has to be done to make sure that the long-term impact is mitigated with all this new regulation that are put in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adil, for the good question. Usam?
I didn't hear it well. Sorry for that. So if you can say it again shortly.
Okay, Usam. Yes. I was just briefly saying that there were some new regulations that were introduced because of COVID-19. And I think the fear by the civil society groups and individuals that these regulations is kind of interfering in the privacy of citizens. And I think even though they were introduced as short-term remedy to the situation, but there is a concern that this regulation may continue down the road. And I just want to hear what your thought about what needs to be done to make sure by all of the stakeholders to make sure that these regulations, they are indeed for the short term, or the short-term solution for the problem that we are facing today. Thank you very much.
Okay, so from my end, I believe that the private sector believes totally in maintaining proper privacy policy, and it is critical to have a proper digital transformation. So originally, it is really important. This is why it is really important even to have a consolidated African privacy, cyber security, and data exchange policy, where then it is clear the balance between the maintaining citizen privacy and rights, and at the same time having big data where there is good analysis and good decision support to help the citizen as well. I just want to highlight, it is really, there is a balance that needs to be forged properly, and for this, proper discussion among stakeholders need to take place to come with the right privacy and access policy, because both are important. Privacy is extremely important, but also big data analysis that is happening already internationally, that needs better regulation so that it would help serving the citizen again in a proper way. Thank you.
There is a question. Thank you very much, Usam. There is a question coming from the chat. It is in French and I will translate it live. Talking about Malabo Convention, is there any provisions obliging or requesting different administrations in the country to use technical infrastructure for the securitization of national or by the regulator? So I will answer to that question anyway. It's in French, and the Malabo Convention is about cybersecurity, personal data protection, and electronic transaction. It doesn't say exactly, it doesn't guide people or administration about using such infrastructure or this one or that one. But it is understood that critical infrastructure within the country need to be safeguarded by specific provision inspired from the Continental Treaty, which is actually the Malabo Convention. So no, there is no provision saying exactly what kind of technology, what infrastructure to use, but it is giving global directive on how to protect the critical infrastructure and what kind of policy needs to be put in place for that. So another question coming from Temidiyao Oyeniyin. My question is on data sharing and data integrity. Recently, during the pandemic, we have a lot of fake news and sharing of unverified information. What can we do to have more regulation that can help to verify information that can have date, time, and tools we can integrate? Well, that's a very good question. Any of you would like to address that? I see Jean-Paul. I was expecting that one. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And yes, indeed, it's a great. It's one of the biggest problems of our age, not only for Africa but for the world. And the first thing is to understand the importance of timely information also from governments, because the fake news often fills the gap where there is a reluctance to share information openly. One of the measures that the ECA has been supporting is the African COVID Information Platform, or ACIP, and which is a framework which different African countries can use for the sharing of information around COVID-19, also while respecting the data security of individuals. So a few weeks ago in Congo, this was launched by the Congolese government, and it is about the two-way process of information. It's about governments ensuring that they provide information in a rapid manner and a manner which is accessible to citizens, but it's also about ensuring that citizens can provide information, for example, to allow contact tracing to happen in a way which is respectful of their rights and of their anonymity and of their health status. And it's always a delicate balance. And we know that sometimes there are accidents that have happened which have compromised the individual privacy of people. But there is a common set of standards which can be promoted at the African level, and by using the best practices, we can ensure that we fight against fake news. I think the challenge is that globally, fake news has also been linked to, unfortunately, people are making money from it, and so there's also a basic sensitization and awareness and education of the citizen which is necessary. That people must understand that on a lot of social media networks, you have to be careful that you are not being part of you are not being used. And that starts with a basic sensitization at the level of an individual, but it is also incumbent on governments and authorities to communicate rapidly, effectively, and transparently, and provide that basic information to the citizen. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I will just compliment by saying something very important, that nowadays information is really costly to produce. but it's very cheap to reproduce in the sense. And we are facing the challenge of this fake news. In one hand, the freedom of expression is part of the inclusion, but in the other hand, that freedom of expression sometimes comes from hate speech, misinformation versus disinformation, because those are the concepts that we need really to develop at a certain point of time. The clearinghouse sort of that are being created by some social media to really stamp the information and to exclude them. Some are still reluctant to that. But we need, again, in Africa to reorganize ourselves. And as Osama said, we are not now, we don't have the luxury to regulate in silo. We need to regulate everything together. And hence, we at the ICT people now, we have to get involved or get close to the people who are really dealing with information. Because at this point of time, the information kind of is another department, it's another kind of sector, and while it's actually using our technology. And in the African Union Commission, we have changed a little bit our governance structure by having what we call the specialized technical committee that includes people from the information sector, but yet they still kind of reluctant by really associating themselves to us by saying, you are technology, you are content. But that is something we need to work on in the future. I don't see any other questions coming from, yes, there is one question coming again. Let me share it with you. Coming from Juma Lemi. Some years back, EU Commission for ICT circulated a draft cyber legislation in one of the internet governance meeting. Is there indication of all African countries adopted or implemented the cyber legislation? Second part is the previous effort of African leaders initiative to connect and transform Africa, gearing toward smart Africa. What transformation can EU ICT Commission have? Well, it's a very tough question to me then. Right, now, with regard to the legislation that has been distributed, the draft legislation has been become at a certain point of time the convention, the EU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. That's one part of the question. The other part of the question, you remember in 2006-07, we started by the Connect Africa, and then we come to the Transform Africa, and now we are into Smart Africa. Those institutions are very well now established in terms of bringing the private sector and the international actors to contribute to the development ICT of the country. The African Union is supporting those institutions, and we are actually co-sharing with ITU the Smart Africa board, and the commissioner is part of the, no, we are sharing, co-sharing the steering committee of Smart Africa, and the African Union is member of the board of Smart Africa. That's all I can say at this point of time, and I don't see any other questions. I see no other comments coming there. Then, is there any comments or last comments from? Yes.
Yes, Mokhtar. I think there is an intervention from Professor Clement. He could not be with us because he's flying, but he recorded an intervention. I don't know if you have time. We can play that recording for his intervention.
We still have, as you said, 12
13,
minutes, isn't it?
12 minutes, yes. He has like 5 minutes intervention. Just from the academia point of view with regard to the COVID-19 and what the academicians are doing in this regard. So with your permission, we can play this video for the audience just to hear the perspective from the academia.
Please go ahead.
Joshua, can you please play the video for us? Joshua. In the meantime, Mokhtar, if you have another question or intervention, people can ask questions, and while we are preparing the video.
I see no questions from the Q&A platform so far. No, I saw any question. Is there any question can come from the floor?
I have a quick comment, if I may.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
yes,
please.
I think there were like questions and comments about privacy, security, and human rights. We need also to manage expectation of all partners or stakeholders. The concepts of privacy and security are changing as we speak with the rapid digitization, with really the immense information that is being collected with individuals. We need to educate people, educate governments that about what needs to happen, what you can approve or not disapprove sharing. This is a learning curve for all. And I think organizations like the UNECA and the African Union, forums like the IGF, are very important to bring everybody to speak out of their silos and to reach some common understanding about the issues and about the solutions.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. The issue of personal data protection is very important. In the sense specifically, we have now the private data merging from the private space to the public space and vice versa. So there is no more boundary between the two spaces. And specifically with the event of IoT and the new technology coming in, as Osam mentioned it very well, we haven't addressed that part of the things because now the objects are part in our private lives and they can interact with us directly and automatically, and we need to know how that interaction will be governed from the personal data protection point of view. I do specifically agree that should be one of our priorities these days.
Another point that you mentioned rightfully about the regulations. In the past, we used to deal with the ICT regulations within the national telecom regulators. Now the regulators in the financial sector, in the healthcare sector, in government services, they all need to come together, and they need to be open to hear what the providers would say, and more interaction is required. You cannot have one regulator for all. Even you mentioned information. I don't think it is practical. We still need specializations, but they need to work in, synergy, because you don't want regulations in the financial sector to collide with digital transformation and financial inclusion, for instance.
Indeed, and by the way, this is one of the major recommendations of the United Nations Secretary General report on digital collaboration. One of the things is we cannot allow ourselves, as I say, to have regulation in isolation. All sectors need to digitally cooperate, and in order to make sure that we do have a comprehensive regulatory systems that address all the issues in the same time. A 360-degree vision is critical within the country, and for us as an Africans also, why not thinking about having our own also data policy in light with GDPRs, and see how we can also cooperate with other people to see how we're going to protect ourselves. But I leave that. Is there any comments from anybody from the floor in waiting for the...
So I think the video, let's give them a chance. Joshua, are you ready, please? Hello?
All right, the video is not ready yet. So meanwhile, we will just, is there any last comments, last two sentences actually to conclude this? I will start by Keith. Keith, give me 1-2 sentences about internet governance issues during and after COVID-19.
Thank you very much.
Punching thoughts. I need two sentences.
2 punching thoughts. We need to look at licensing to enable community networks thrive, to fill the gap of digital inclusion and infrastructure at community level. And second thing, let's look at manufacturing, specifically on energy, so that we can build Africa solutions around energy to support other infrastructures that can then support the digital transformation. The opportunity of digital transformation for Africa is in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which speaks of free movement of people, services, and goods. And this can only happen if we harmonize our economy. Thank you very much.
And I can tell you something. We need to apprehend access in a very different way. It's not only providing the internet connectivity, but also provide accessible, affordable devices and specifically provide electricity. Last night, I missed a very good session.
Absolutely.
Because simply I don't have electricity at home, and then I missed everything. Osam?
I agree with you, Mukhtar. It's not enough to give internet, but the ability to use it. So capacity building, digital literacy is at the center of it.
Yes, the capacity, the electricity, the access, all of that together. Osam?
Yes, thank
you. 2 question
first,
sentences.
Thank you very much for such a very fruitful discussion. My opinion is we need really consolidated effort to highlight further to decision makers the importance of carrying forward digital transformation. We need in Africa consolidated efforts related to access. We need first of all consolidated efforts related to dissipating information regarding exact needs, potential challenges, opportunities, best practices, and policies in different African countries. We cannot continue while talking about digital transformation without having clearer information about existing policies, best practice, projects, opportunities, and challenges in different African countries. Then we need to consolidate our effort, especially in access, in content creation, and in capacity building. Thank you very much.
Jean-Paul?
Thank you. I think the focus has to be digital empowerment, and there are several aspects to achieve that. You need, of course, the infrastructure, which includes the electricity networks as well as the fiber optic cable and so on, access to the internet. There's the policy frameworks at the level of government, the legal frameworks, and the capacity building of citizens, which starts at a very young age, and preparing our populations for the digital age, which can allow us to build back better. Thanks, and back to you.
Thank you very much. Sharif?
We need to work on building pyramids and bridges in Africa. Pyramids of knowledge, pyramids of knowledge, pyramids of knowledge and capacity building, and building bridges across gaps that exist in our society everywhere. So, and this cannot be done without partnership across all sectors. So building pyramids and bridges, I'll leave you with that.
Wonderful. That's exactly coming from an Egyptian's building, the pyramid. By the way, nobody knows how to build pyramids so far. So you make it very complicated. Now, with that, with that nice thought, just to conclude our work, is to allow this video to will be our conclusion. Professor Clément intervention will be concluding our session, and right away we'll be stopping. Go ahead and play that video, please.
The COVID-19 pandemic has made it necessary for educational institutions globally to make dramatic changes to their operations, as well as to their teaching and learning activities and engagements, and to some extent to their research-based activities and operations. These changes involve navigating several uncharted territories of approaches to teaching and learning, as well as research activities, hence the new normal experience. Campus-based teaching and learning at various levels of the educational system in most countries, including those in Africa, have moved to online delivering, coupled with the delivering of other student services using principally the internet delivery platform. The deployment of educational delivery technologies and systems to facilitate teaching and learning has been a central feature of these changes and transformation in education during the new normal. Education in the new normal question. The basic question is, in consideration of pertinent internet governance issues within the context of the new normal, characterized by online teaching and learning, should African educational institutions rethink their current approaches and practices to academic program development and delivery? That is the basic question. The simple answer is yes. The new normal necessitated the need for educational institutions, especially those at the tertiary level, to within the contents of internet governance issues, relook at some aspects of their 1. Curriculum and academic program development and delivery. 2. Program development and delivery infrastructure, protocols, and systems. 3. Digital skills and requisite human resource development to support academic program development and delivery during the new normal. 4. Quality assurance systems and protocols in order to revamp, orientate, and fine-tune these protocols to ensure that they deliver quality education, training, and research outputs and outcomes in the new normal. Let's look at some internet governance issues related to education, teaching, learning, and research in the new normal. There are a number of issues and areas we can look at. The first one is the digital e-learning, education, training, delivery. Here we are talking about curriculum development, academic program development and delivery, assessment protocols and systems. Here the key stakeholders are the academic institutions themselves, the teachers, the faculty, and EdTech developers and service providers. Number 2 is the digital delivery infrastructure. Here the key stakeholders are the academic institutions, government, ISPs, telcos, EdTech developers, and service providers. The key issues here are the internet connectivity, access and affordability of that access, institutions, computer systems, and internet infrastructure, learning support systems, infrastructure, and administration, and student lifecycle services support infrastructure and system. The next is learning and teaching delivery system. Here, the key stakeholders or players are the academic institutions, the teachers, the faculty, EdTech developers, and service providers. The key issues to look at here or to consider here are the issues of learning management systems and learning and teaching support software and systems. There's also a need to look at the issue of internet governance as it relates to digital resources. Here, the key stakeholders are academic institutions and EdTech developers and service providers. The issue to look at here are the digital learning resources, e-library systems, and of course the multimedia systems and resources which are needed to facilitate online embedded learning during the new normal. Another key issue is the digital skills and human resources. Here the key stakeholders are academic institutions, the teachers, the faculties, and of course the learners. The issues here relate to digital skill development of teachers and the faculty, digital skills and HR development for the school administrators, and of course, skill development for online quality assurance program development and delivery support staff. And finally, the question of quality assurance systems and protocols need to be looked at by the academic institutions, and of course, other key stakeholders here, the teachers and the faculties, the learners, and the EdTech organizations. Concluding remark. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about a new normal in education. This new normal, which is predicted to remain even after the pandemic, means that educational institutions globally will need to critically look at how they deliver teaching and learning and support research work and facilitate student life cycle support activities in the new normal. The prediction is that a number of these educational institutions, especially the universities, are likely to maintain some aspects of the approaches being deployed during the COVID-19 period, even after the pandemic. The consensus is that education will never be the same again. In other words, we are at the threshold of what can be referred to as the new normal in educational delivery. The COVID-19 pandemic has, in effect, disrupted and impacted on traditional mode of educational delivery and is therefore playing a transformative role. Education delivery in the new normal raise a number of internet governance related issues as they relate to e-learning, digital delivery infrastructure, learning and teaching delivery systems, digital resources, digital skills and human resources, online learning quality assurance systems, and protocols. There is the need to address the question of how best to deliver education in Africa in the new normal, while considering a number of internet governance issues as they relate to the deployment of various educational delivery technologies and systems, including those of the internet, in this transformative process. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was actually a very good contribution with regard to the COVID-19 and education challenges systems. With that, I will then, we are, I believe, Adil, I seek for advice. We are 6 minutes over the time, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. We started 5 minutes late, yeah, so we are at the end of the session. All
right, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the for your contribution.
Hello, Mokhtar.
Yes.
Okay, before we go, I would wanted to take a photograph, so if you can turn on our video.
Oh, okay. My video are on.
Okay. So, Red. All right. All right, say cheese.
Cheese.
Are we in a gallery view? Sure. Okay. All right, I'm done. So.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you to those who came very early in the morning. Thank you for those who stayed late. Sheriff, happy Thanksgiving. And I mean, 4 a.m. in the morning, 5 a.m., right? I cannot, I mean, it's unbelievable to have done. It's really great. And I mean, specifically for you, it's 5 a.m.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy. I'm really, yes, exactly. I'm privileged to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Osam. You and I are in the same time zone, like Jean-Paul. We are all around this area, but thank you very much for your contribution and for your expertise and for sharing them with the internet governance, African internet governance community, and specifically with the youth. Keith, thank you very much for being a very good representative for our young people. Keep on. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Thank you, Mokhtar. Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. We learned a lot from the presentation. It was very informative. And, you know, for the participants, please keep the question coming, and we continue the discussion and the dialogue moving forward. there was some observation with regard to the presentation of gender representation. In fact, we invited some female to the presentation, but unfortunately, because of unforeseen reasons, they were not able to attend. Hopefully, in the upcoming presentation, we see some gender balance going forward. Let's keep on this channel, on this Zoom channel for the next session. Let's take a 5-minute break while we get our next panelist for our next panel. Thank you very much. So hello again. Can we have the panelists for the session number 2, which is entitled Unlocking the Digital Potential of the DLDC, Developing and Least Developing Countries. This session is going to be moderated by Dr. Jimson, I think CEO of Contemporary. I think all of you know Dr. Jimson. He's been there. He was the head of FECTA, and now he's the CEO of Contemporary. Dr. Jimson is, you see them everywhere. You see him everywhere in all this international gathering and meeting, and we are happy to have him as the moderator for the next session. We will give the floor to Dr. Jimson as soon as we have all the panelists in the session joining the session. Just bear with us a few minutes, and as we get the panelists joining the session. Thank you very much. Joshua, the panelists are waiting to be promoted. I think they are there. All of them, they already joined the Zoom link, but they are waiting to be promoted as a panelist. So I see Abdul Hakim already joined. Hi, Professor Abdul Hakim, how are you? And we have Jimson. Hello, Jimson, how are you?
Hi, Adil.
Yeah.
Greetings.
Greetings, greetings. Yeah. So I see all the panelists now joining. Dr. Nena is there also.
Hi, Adio. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Hi, Nena.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Very well.
Good.
Hi, Chairman and the Deputy Chairman.
We salute.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Kosi is already here. Kosi, welcome.
Hello, Kosi.
And Lily?
Lily is right here. I think I got in here.
Excellent.
Do you have everybody?
Yes.
Hi, you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay.
Can we have a video on so that we can just take a
Not yet.
Not yet. I think.
Hello, guys.
Who are we missing now?
Jerry.
Not yet.
Also, Jerry is here.
I put my video
Yes.
phone after. Yeah.
Hello,
Yes, I'm on.
Hello, how are you? It's good to have you, Jerry. Okay.
Pleasure to have you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Dr. Jimson, you have a challenge. You have a challenge in front of you. So the previous session was really great. So you have to outdo them. So this is a huge challenge in front of you. So you have to outperform the previous panel. So I'm not putting pressure on you guys, but I'm just giving you.
No. What will happen is that we will just cut the last session and paste it here. So we're done.
Good idea. That's undue pressure.
So if once you say we can go ahead, we are ready to go ahead.
You have all your panelists now?
I guess
we have Lily also. We have Lily. So I think you have all of them pretty much. So I hand it over to you.
Yes.
So I think I already introduced the subject. I think you have the bio, but I think for the sake of time, the panelists can introduce themselves during their interventions. This way we save some time. And then we have, at the end of the panel, we have 30 minutes for Q&A.
Okay.
All the best. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. So take a deep breath and let us move forward. Okay. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the 9th African Internet Governance Forum with the theme Unlocking Africa's Digital Opportunities during and post-COVID-19. And specifically to plenary session 2 with the topic Unlocking the Digital Potentials of Developing and Least Developed Countries. That is talking about us in Africa. Let me provide you with a brief about this workshop. This workshop or session will explore the digital potential of Africa in the COVID and post-COVID-19 era. It will also examine the digital cooperation initiative that encompasses the industry for technologies and related methods, such as smart manufacturing and environmental sustainability with meaningful connectivity. It will also focus on the requisite digital skills and tools necessary for the sustainable development of the labor and human capacities that are imperative benefit for our people. Appropriate policy and regulatory framework that will also guide implementation of the above direction will be subject to robust dialogue and debate in this session. We'll be focusing specifically on 2 questions, and we'll take 1 question at a time. The first question, our panelists will address those questions, and then we'll pause a little. If there's anything on the floor, then we can take it. Then we'll go to the second round of the questioning. And the first question is looking at the COVID-19 pandemic that has led to a lot of shutdown of many countries.
Though in Africa, we are quite spared, but notwithstanding, we have various COVID-19 protocols in place, which we should not take for granted. An important and ongoing discussion is how to build a more robust and resilient African economy. And that brings about this question: how do we ensure that all stakeholder groups collaborate, prioritize, and invest in the needed digital infrastructure and skills? How do we do that? B, what strategies and policies need to be articulated and implemented to proactively prepare African countries in the case of similar recurrence? And how do we mitigate the adverse effects through a more resilient supply chain in a digital economy? And the second question is, how can the developing and least developed countries evolve digital cooperation initiatives that encompass the industry 4.0 technologies and related methods such as smart manufacturing, Internet of Things, and environmental sustainability for the benefits of our citizens in the area of job creation and economic survivability? Once again, my name is Jameson Olufuye. I'll be your moderator for this session, and co-moderating with me is Engineer Adetola Sogbeson. I believe Sogbeson is in the room and is the newly elected AFICTA Vice Chair for West Africa and CEO of ASEAN. So please, if you could promote him, that would be great. Also supporting is AFICTA Secretariat staff, Kayode Oyemi and Samuel Dada. We have a robust panel for this session, and they are experts and they are prepared to deal with these questions. But if you permit me, I want to really use the opportunity to thank my friend Adil, Mukhtar, and all the AU and ECA team, because I remember in 2011, when there was controversy about should we start African IGF, they said, yes, we have to start. And despite opposition, they moved forward. And there's no doubt African IGS has had a tremendous value to IG discussion in Africa. So thank you so much, Team AU and Team ECA. Now to our panel. The chair of Consultancy Support Services Limited, and also chair of the African Union Cybersecurity Working Group. He is our River Elder Abdul Hakim Ajijola.
Good morning, thank you.
My pleasure. And also we are with us Miss Lily Edinam. Miss Lily Edinam, you are most welcome, of ACLab Foundation. ACLab Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And we also have Dr. Kosi Amesino of the Ministry of Planning and Development, Benin. Is the IT director right there. You're welcome, Dr. Kosi.
Okay, thank you. I'm here.
Also with us is erudite senior lecturer in law and technology, Swansea University, and vice chair, African Union Cybersecurity Experts Group. Dr. Nena Ajufo, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jameson, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Sorry.
Yes, and also to welcome the Enterprise Sales Lead Africa of Craft Silicon, Kenya, Mr. Jerry Shikol. You're most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I happen to be on the road somewhere, but I'm going to be very, very much involved in this. Thank you very much for having me on.
Okay, it's a great pleasure. So let me just focus again on the first question. Say, amid this COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to shutdown of many countries, and Africa not excluded because we were shut down earlier anyway, an important ongoing discussion how to build a more robust, resilient African economy. It's so important. And it's also part of the discussion in the previous session. And so we are building on what they have discussed. So how do we ensure that all stakeholder groups collaborate, prioritize, and invest in the needed digital infrastructure and skills and what strategies and the policy frameworks need to be articulated and implemented to proactively prepare countries in the case of similar recurrence, and how do we mitigate the adverse effects through a more resilient supply chain in a digital economy? Let me give it to Abdulhakeem Ajijola. What is your response to this?
Thank you very much, Doctor. First and foremost, I think that given the number of women I see on our team, clearly there is much better representation than in the previous intervention or in the previous panel. And this actually goes straight to the heart of, I believe, the issues that you are raising, that we need to be able to get everybody on board and everybody to pull together. No nation, no continent, and especially African nations and the African continent cannot afford not to utilize 50% of their population, which is our women in the first instance. So we really need to mobilize that population. Number two, the other 50%, one would argue that almost 47% of that other 50%, our young male, our youth, we are also not leveraging. And so you can see that there is a lot of human capacity. And remember, these technologies are for human beings, by human beings. Economies are about people. People must be empowered, not just with knowledge and capacity, but also financially in order to spend. And it is that spending that grows economies. And so back to the root of my initial answer to the question posed is that I think as Africans and across Africa, we need to have a paradigm shift. It's our thinking that needs to change, because it is that thinking that changes our views and our initiatives vis-a-vis technology and related capacity building. And for example, of the kind of changes or paradigm shift that I would advocate, first, let us now as a society or as an economy, as a nation, let us begin to look at cybersecurity itself as a profit center, not simply an organizational cost center, but as a societal profit center. We have to note that the African cybersecurity solutions market this year, 2020, is estimated at about $2.32 billion and is expected to grow to about 4.6 billion by 2025. This means that there are jobs to be created, there's wealth to be generated, and indeed our governments can also earn tax as a byproduct of jobs and wealth that can be generated. And so cybersecurity, for example, because it's an area I'm particularly interested in, is an opportunity to establish sustainable indigenous cybersecurity solutions, micro, small, and medium enterprises based, solutions and providers and developers driven primarily by our young empowered Africans. Because as Africans, we must make sure that the good, that is the positive enterprises, the positive opportunities, empower all of us to out-recruit those who would go into the bad, the bad actors. So the good actors must out-recruit the bad actors, because typically any human being does not start with the intention of becoming a bad actor. It may be lack of opportunity, lack of capacity. Yes, there might be social and other reasons, but generally speaking, as a continent, if we change our paradigm to the point where we are trying to out-recruit the bad actors, I think this will be in our own best self-interest, both as a continent and as nations within the continent. And I just want to touch on one other issue. Yes, there is a lot of talk about connectivity across Africa and the limitations. And a major worry of those involved in connectivity is what we call the last mile. Basically, for example, from a tower or a distribution point to the home or to the end user. And this is very critical. But from a cybersecurity perspective, we also worry, and our sleepless nights are about the last 6 inches between the screen and basically our eyes and our brain, because it is in the brain where, you know, the brain gets fooled, the brain gets influenced. It is actually about, you know, how do we make sure that the right things get to the brain? And again, taking from the last group, there was they touched on the issue of fake news and hate speech. And many of these things we are seeing today are driven by influence operations that come from outside the continent. And therefore, we need to develop indigenous capacities, you know, that are homegrown to solve homegrown challenges. Thank you.
That is well loaded, quite robust. Yes, focus on local content, and we are mostly influenced by things that come outside our shores. I really do agree with you. Let me move on to Ms. Lily Edina. Ms. Lily Edina, over to you. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're listening to us from. And happy to be on this session, and thankful for the previous panel that did an awesome job launching us into this session. So maybe you can all say in the chat, we all know that times have changed, and let's see how many people have had to write letters of late, paper letter. You can see that if you say in the chat, we've had more people do a lot of things digitally. So you can just say in the chat if you've written a letter in the past 2 weeks, or if you've had to do something more paper than the digital ecosystem we are talking about now. So my name is Lily, and even though this panel is made up of young people and others who are young at heart, I'm humbled to make and amplify the voices of hundreds of young people through my work at the Hakla Foundation and engagement with young people in the internet governance space in Ghana, West Africa, and the continent at large. So in sharing the ideas on how to ensure countries thrive digitally, especially in the fourth industrial revolution, where we see a rapid shift from the manual to digital processes, I'll dwell on the second specific objective of the Africa Digital Transformation Strategy 2020 to 2030, which highlights that by 2030, all people should be digitally empowered and be able to access safely and securely to at least 6 MB all the time, wherever they are in the continent, and at an affordable price of no more than $1 per MB, and through a smart device manufactured in the continent, and at the price of no more than 100 USD to benefit from all the basic e-services and content, of which at least 30% is developed and hosted in Africa. So I'm happy that Mr. Abdul actually spoke about content creation on the continent. So I'm particularly excited about how the objective strives to progress the continent from being just consumers of ICTs and content online and the related resources, but to put us at the forefront of innovation and localized content creation. And once we are at this level, we are bound to be able to be more in control in the case of a similar reoccurrence of a pandemic, and rally efforts to mitigate the associated adverse effect. So we want to look at how we ensure that stakeholders collaborate to a large extent to thrive digitally in the face of a pandemic. So I'm going to talk about, most importantly, the low levels of investment in research and development, low enrollment rates in higher education, and that's a limited supply of skilled labor, and inadequate or unstable policy and regulatory environment capable of promoting progress. And all this play a role in the poor state of innovation and creativity when it comes to having Africans and young people, especially because I work in young people, at the forefront of innovation on the continent. And in ensuring that all the stakeholder groups collaborate and prioritize and invest in the needed digital infrastructure and skills, there's a need for access to information. That's what I came to my mind looking at the question. So this is hinged on investment in research and development, and then there's a correlation between the investment in research and development and economic growth. And it just goes to show that the greater investment in research and development, the broader the scope for innovation that can drive growth. And yet for developing and least developed countries, the ratio of expenditure to research and development to gross domestic product remains low. Now we go on to see the effect this has on growth in the digital space. And it, to some extent, it's almost as though we are being left behind, even though there are strides being made. So this presents a key hurdle to building competitiveness and capacity to absorb and adapt to existing state-of-the-art technologies. And if you have to talk about how to build a resilient internet, we have to also consider not just the building of hardware and access to it, we have to look at the capacity building part. If we all have to collaborate as stakeholders from private sector, government, from civil societies, first off, what information are we feeding on? How do our research or the innovations we're bringing on board solve a particular issue we've identified? Else, we would be more or less reinventing so many wheels, even though there'll be an opportunity to gather learning from elsewhere based on data and to improve what we have ongoing in the continent. So it moves or it hinges around the research and development we have, the access to information, and communicating this information in ways that are very understandable to all stakeholders. So if you ask different people what the digital space means to them or being digital means to them, they will come from very different angles. For me as a young person, what comes to my mind with regards internet resilience and connectivity will be more to the extent of affordability and access. We want to ask, how much do you pay to stay connected? And if you're able to build capacity, so you have some of these technologies being built in the continent, who knows, we may be looking at lower prices and even to a large extent, have content that is more consumable and can build capacities for years and the generation years to come. So from my point of view, this is what I've gathered, and hopefully they're able to build and work with it around the topic we have this morning.
Excellent. You've really spoken very well for your community, the youth, and I believe we are hearing loud and clear. There is serious need to provide access to information, let it be accessible. I believe you are talking about open data policy, so that youth can have access to data, diverse data, and that can easily be used to solve problems, the local problems. Yes, build their capacity to solve those problems. Thank you very much. Before I call the next speaker, I just want us to know that we have interpretation services in this workshop. So if you are more biased to French, please look at the bottom of the screen and you can click interpretation and click on French to listen to this transmission in French. And also, if you have questions, begin to put them in the Q&A. I believe my colleague, the moderator, is already watching and they will call my attention to any question at the end of this round. Thank you very much, Lily. Let me move on to Dr. Kosi Amesino. Dr. Kosi, what is your perspective about this?
Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, can you hear you? Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was attending the ministry events. I just come in my office now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Kosi from Ministry of Planning and Development in Benin. We all of us know when we enter COVID-19 process time, all of things are be changing in economic sector. All the things. COVID-19 shows us the importance of the internet. And at that time, the governance of internet become very critical for all. We know now that internet infrastructure must be available for all, every time, to permit the people to grow their activities. To build that, I recommend us to endorse one method, the method we call inter-network synergy. Inter-network synergy is something built by some research to permit people who are working on infrastructure area. When you are planning to make some infrastructure for water, for roads, or for energy, it's important to look at the design and make some regulation and let people put on your projects the way where it's not necessary to make after some job for Jenny Civil and something like that. We prepare the line, the way for water, we prepare the way for internet, we prepare the way for energy when we are putting roads in one term. That is very critical for us. We don't have more money to make everything every time. As government, we look at collaboration with all the stakeholders, especially the private people. The private people, we have a lot of rich people in Africa. What they are used with their money? In which sector they are making their money today? It is important to encourage them to move to ICT sector, for example, and let them know that government will build very good policy strategy to permit the infrastructure sharing, something like that, to permit how it is possible for them to interconnect, help us to interconnect all our African countries. Maybe we don't have international cable, we can communicate out inside Africa. That is very important for us to know now.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Kosi, for that. It's good to get this confession from a top government official that COVID-19 was a real problem for the government. I'm happy you are very truthful. You are transparent. This is what we're talking about, being transparent and accountable. Okay, and you have seen that you have to use resources properly so that just once all infrastructure needs should be channeled properly and to use taxpayers' money effectively, and to be able to encourage the private sector to collaborate with you. So you can see the private sector is not at odds with government. We are to complement the effort of government. So we appreciate your intervention. Thank you so much, Dr. Kosi. Let me move on to the law, the Amazon law. Dr. Inena Fenya-Jofo. Dr. Inena, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Lufi. My fellow panelists have actually touched on very important issues in relation to the question, but I'll come in from a legal perspective, if you would allow me. I would start by saying that, you know, in consonance with what the other panelists have said, that in terms of COVID-19 and our preparedness, I would say that the increased diffusion of digital infrastructure and digital skills post-COVID-19 will include two factors. Now, we talk a lot about the technological factors, and I would also like to talk about regulatory factors, because the extent to which developing countries, like countries in Africa, will be able to push that digital infrastructure agenda, if you like, will be dependent upon extensive stakeholder group support. And this will be through both international, regional cooperation and measures which will in turn enable the advancement of effective policies and strategies. So we engage with multi-stakeholders in a manner that would have the ripple effect of transforming into effective policies and strategies. We can't say that there are no policies in Africa. It would be illusory to say we have no policies. You know, we have no strategies. You know, we know very well about the recent African Union Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa. But sometimes I feel what is missing is we talk about these strategies, we talk about these policies, but then there is usually a lack of conceptual clarity in terms of how we go about it and what we want to do. You know, so in the first place, we need to revise and realign most of our strategies and policies to focus on prioritizing digital transformation, but with a multi-stakeholder approach. And in terms of our contemporary reality and what is the new normal. Because COVID-19 has shown us that unless sustainable policies replace these our often short-sighted activities that we use to replace our unpreparedness, we would face an increasingly bleak digital future. Now, in terms of strategies and policies, I would say Lily probably thought about what most of the things I wanted to say. I think we've said so much every time we have sessions, but I wanted to look at a regional access policy. And this is driven from, if I would say, a human rights understanding or a human rights consideration. When we talk about digital inclusion, let's look at a regional access policy which will ensure the availability of digital infrastructure and skills on equal terms for everyone in Africa. It is not impossible. Now, if you think about the Digital Rights Bill that was not passed into law in Nigeria, I was so enthusiastic about that bill because I thought that, permit me to say, Nigeria being the giant of Africa, sorry if you don't like this, we're going to set an example in the region in terms of the fundamentals of digital rights, because that bill made provision for disability rights in consideration of access to the internet. Unfortunately, it was not passed into law. Now, why do I discuss a regional access policy? This will allow access to a defined minimum service of not just specified quality, but also on the basis of affordable cost to all users, independent of geographical location in Africa. And like I said, Lily has actually talked about this in terms of, minimum standards and what is expected. Again, it's also important for us to also think about, if you like, a regional service policy. Now, I categorize the regional service policy in terms of three issues. The first one is basic connection. And Lily as well touched upon this. And this includes basic internet connection to standard ICT infrastructure. Let's define what basic connection means in Africa, and let's ensure or gear towards ensuring basic provisions of digital technologies on the basis of what we determine as basic connection. As a matter of policy, we should also understand the value of public information through digital technologies. Now, I'm not talking about information through newspapers, but through digital technologies. Again, Lily touched on this, and this would include government information, vital community information, services, health information, and COVID-19 has shown us the importance of access to health information. So we must ensure a robust access, to basic connection, but in terms of understanding the place of information in the digital age. Then, of course, compulsory digital education cannot be dispensed with. Now, we've talked about curriculums in the last session, but let's look at this on the basis of formal and even informal education in a way that will ensure participation in digital economy goals. Of course, I can't forget national jurisdictions in terms of their policies. I think national jurisdictions must go back to the table of the right to development. Let's understand what development is and approach conceptions and issues related to advancing the digital economy from the basis of a right. I say this because the right to development is a fundamental and binding right in the law based on the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. And I will touch on this more when I address the second questions. Again, our legislations and regulations permit me to say that most times developing countries spend very little on understanding the dynamics of the digital economy, so that sometimes governments in Africa fail to realize that we're dealing with technologies of unprecedented effects that their influence permits down to family, down to local neighborhoods, down to economic and societal issues. Like Abdul Hakim talked about, we're dealing with issues of crime in cyberspace. We're dealing with issues of freedom of speech, infringement of intellectual property rights, breach of data protection. And so we can't continue to make policies or strategies in isolation of the regulation of law in cyberspace, in isolation of the regulation of rule of law in cyberspace, because, there is that ripple effect, there is that dynamic between what is happening in terms of law as well as policy. So let's think about the relationship between legislation, policies, and as well as regulations. And people have also touched on this: market regulation and liberalization. Let's look at market liberalization from a regulatory approach. Now, the regulation of the digital market is a factor that cannot be dispensed with. Of course, we know all this, and the monopolistic digital markets will no longer suffice. But then what I'm trying to add here is that in regulating the digital market, governments should ensure that stakeholders, developers, manufacturers, providers and suppliers of ICT not only offer user-friendly, competitive, cheaper and effective products, but they also feed into the regulatory process when these laws are made. We've also touched upon public and private sector partnership, so I wouldn't go into that. But finally, Abdul Hakim and Lily talked about content creation. And the angle I want to feed into what they've said is from a perspective of user trust and user friendliness. Sometimes we look at this content creation from the basis of not just the state, but also, ICT creators, developers. But I want to touch on a people-centered approach, which feeds into user trust and user friendliness. So governments must also, through education, policies, and the creation of awareness, work towards an increased acceptance of digital technologies in marginalized societies. Access is one thing, but acceptability, even in the marginalized societies in Africa, is another thing. So this sort of concerted actions, policy consideration, and strategic considerations by state and non-state actors in order to develop new strategies will be beneficial. But as well, we need to review the existing body of laws, policies and strategies, which will help in getting us prepared for a reoccurrence, like you said, Dr. Olufuye, and also towards mitigating adverse effects post-COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, 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 Dr. Nena. What you are simply underscoring is that we need to be smart. We need to be smart with our regulation, flexible, smart. We need to, the decision makers need to know what they are regulating and what they are legislating upon, among many others. Thank you so much. Actually, legislation, smart legislation can drive in inclusiveness, drive participation, drive digitization, and drive solution. Thank you so much for that. All right, it's been quite rich. And let me turn it now to Jerry Shikule. Jerry Shikule, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for including me in this conversation. Well, I look at some statistics in Africa, and we are quite robust. One of the challenges that we have seen over due to the pandemic is the fact that now there has been a little more. First of all, the utilization of digital channels has gone up, although having not had sufficient penetration of this channel, especially across different channels, and I'll speak to these channels a little shortly. We are in a place in Africa where we can actually just lift our acceptance of digital infrastructure and digital content. So a lot of the panelists have talked about two things. One is infrastructure, the second is content. Now, those go hand in hand. So I look at, for example, internet penetration across Africa, and the average is just about 38, 39%. I see that the highest of those is I think Kenya at 87%, 88%. But then there's much more. I see the ranges going all the way to into their 30s, which creates the average. And the global average is about 35%. What we would encourage is governments to come in and partner with some of the panelists have talked about private sector. And private sector in this case, the easiest one would be telcos. Reason why I speak of telcos is because telcos have very, very, very good penetration to the last mile. My fellow panelists have talked about the last mile, and telcos have really, really reached out to the last mile. Now, the way to grow consumption of content, especially over the mobile phone, is now we are transitioning from the traditional USSD content and SIM-based content to digital content, which is we get on smartphones. Again, smartphone utilization encourages good value around technology and digital appreciation of digital resources and digital content. This facilitates and enhances the consumption, and even there's a lot more value that that communities get once there's more digital and more relation and access to smartphone technology. For example, one of the things that governments can do, again, I've talked about partnering with the private sector. I have seen some governments use regulators and develop policies around ensuring that we are, the very bottom of the pyramid, the consumers at the bottom of the pyramid actually have good credit that then helps them access smartphone technology. This develops and grows their consumption of digital content. Consumption of digital content then helps us create our own content. We've talked about creating our own content locally, and we reduce consumption of content out there. For example, the likes of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So we have created our own platforms. We need to create our own platforms indigenously. So then consumption is much more localized than it is global. Secondly, I was to talk about the opportunities around that have been brought about by the pandemic. The fact that movement is restricted means that now there's much more engagement over either the internet or over the mobile and over the phone, and this then gives us the opportunity to create opportunities. To create revenue generating opportunities around the internet. Now, the internet is very important as we think about how to leverage on the unfortunate pandemic that has hit us at the beginning of this year. And governments have to create policies around the youth, especially generating revenue over the internet. One of the panelists has talked about regulation, and this was the previous panelist. She talked about regulation, and the regulation is critical. Out here in Kenya, we have legislated and passed a bill that then has created it's the data privacy law. Data is critical. It's all over, but then access and utilization of it must be controlled. We have seen, yes, we have seen a lot of organizations coming in and utilizing private data very, very poorly. For example, in Kenya, I can tell you, we have quite a number of virtual lenders who do scoring and lending over the mobile phone, and you can access credit of up to $20, $30, $40. Of course, this is good for the growth and appreciation of credit, and as well the financial inclusion. But then beyond that, now the amount of data that is used in scoring is abused. We have seen a lot of this being abused. People calling, for example, the other people's relatives to inform of them of a $20, $30 non-performing loan that one of their relatives borrowed. So the law then manages that and manages consumption of data, especially from private practice, which then there's a bit of control over how this data is utilized and how it is used by these enterprises. Yes. And beyond data regulation, beyond, just as I conclude, beyond data regulation and data control, we are looking at now the opportunities, and the opportunities around this include, creating hubs, for new entrants into the employment market, to then utilize the internet to generate some revenue, and of course develop software and develop very, very useful resources that then can be used in the financial sector, in the telecommunications sector, in the agricultural sector, in private sector, and many driven across the continent. So thank you very much, good people. That is my summary of this question right now.
Thank you very much. Jerry, I wish I could see your face, at least it's part of the local content. Okay. Yeah, very good, very good. So you are very mobile. That is a good one. Yes, very proactive. Thank you very much for that. And really, I think there is something I need to mention here for the benefit of our governments across Africa. We have heard from Dr. Kosi, and we've heard Jerry, we've heard all the speakers. In fact, the point is we can even make more money once our services are facing the internet. More money, more revenue can come in if we have smart regulation that puts services online, and then you make more revenue. You give credit to the citizens, and the citizens will utilize it. They'll get more taxes. So it's win-win. And this was underscored during the IGF, during one of our workshops as well, similar to this. A government enterprise put their special services, in Abuja online, and they're even making more money than when there was no COVID. So they want to put more. So let us heed that this advice. They are very, very useful. This brings us to the end of the first round. I don't know if there are any question at this point, but we'll move rapidly to the second question. And the second question, it says, how can we evolve digital cooperation initiative that encompass Industry 4 technologies and related methods such as smart manufacturing, Internet of Things, and environmental sustainability for the benefit of our citizens in the area of job creation and economic survivability? Over to you, Dr. Abdul Hakim Ajijoba.
Thank you, Dr. Jameson and colleagues. I think I'm going to slightly sidestep the question for a moment, because I think we've brought up some very important issues. One of the things that arises from what I've heard thus far from my esteemed colleagues on the panel, and that is that framing is very important, how we frame things. So for example, take cybersecurity. Is it a national security issue, or is it a digital economy risk management issue because that also determines who should lead. And so that leadership also basically guides how we interact with other economies and other parts of the world in terms of IoT, Industry 4.0, and other things. So that if, for example, you have the wrong, not necessarily wrong, but a mismatch. So, for example, you look at IoT principally through a national security lens. Meanwhile, your potential partners are looking at it through a development lens, or maybe some others are looking at it through an economic lens. Then you're not going to be able to build or rapidly build the requisite synergies to actually address the issues. So in a roundabout way, I would put that forward. Also, on my esteemed colleagues have brought up time and again the issue of legislation. I come from the perspective where I believe that legislation, its primary function really is to empower technical regulators. For example, in our, in the technologies we are talking about, because they have a much more, the regulators, I mean, have a much more nuanced insight. They certainly have flexibility, and they are able to be highly proactive as necessary, because these technologies evolve very rapidly. And therefore, for example, we must note that cyberspace seems borderless to the user, to the average user, and indeed seems borderless to the bad actor. But that same cyberspace is limited by jurisdiction to law enforcement. So for law enforcement and many of the good enforcement actors, they have borders. Those borders are often, the national or sometimes subnational or regional jurisdiction, depending on how the legislation is framed. So it's important for legislation, not necessarily, because legislation is very difficult to change. It's a slow process, and it's meant to be slow because it's a deliberative process. And so it's a mismatch between the technology rapidity and the slowness of legislation. In fact, a gentleman called Barry Green encapsulated this when he said that cyber criminals operate at the speed of light, while law enforcement, operates at the speed of law. And so I think it is crucial that African legislators and governments in particular understand that it's important that legislation, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have legislation that says if you do this, there's a jail sentence or there's a fine or a combination thereof. That's not what I'm saying. But the legislation principally should be able to empower, regulators to implement and carry out the legislation. And I think Jerry also had mentioned this very clearly, that in Kenya, you have a data protection legislation. Indeed, in Nigeria, for example, we have a very similar legislation. And what our regulator has done is that the monitoring and enforcement of that legislation has been devolved to private sector players, and thereby, interestingly, has created a whole new sustainable private sector ecosystem. And I believe well over 200 or 300 companies are now players in that ecosystem, employing anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 Nigerians. So again, how you develop the legislation, how you empower the regulators, and how they implement it enables us to build on those Internet of Things, to be able to develop, whole new socioeconomic sectors that simply did not exist just a year and a half ago. Just 18 months ago, these things did not exist. And arguably, for most of us, we didn't even envisage it. So, if we want to move forward with and drive these new technologies, drive Internet 4.0, we need to bring those kind of new paradigms, new framing of how we see things and how we see the world. so that, you know, we will continue to have, for example, challenges in the global DNS. There are some that are technical, there are some that are socioeconomic. And I won't get too much into the technicalities of it, but suffice it to say that government and the legislators and even the regulators themselves, as they manage these processes, need to continually look at how do we empower the good actors, the positive actors. Because one of the concerns I have faced, especially across Africa, is that I think, and maybe I should speak mainly of the one I'm very familiar with, Nigeria, we tend to overregulate. And that overregulation tends to stifle. So it's about how do you empower others within certain confines, yes, within boundaries, but how do you empower others actually to build the kind of constructive society that we seek and want?
Yes. So you're talking about regulation that creates more opportunities, more jobs.
Correct.
You know, and stimulate the economy.
Correct.
Excellent. I will still come back to you, Lakim. Let me call on Lily. Lily. So,
Hi.
what do you think? What do you think we can do in terms of smart engagement, even from the youth?
Right. Okay, so I love the discussion around regulation, even though I'm not so much of a legal person, but it's important because around the world, people are working to make the internet a natural extension of who we are. And so we are to a large extent mimicking rights that are offline to online. So if there are rights that have to, if there are anything that defines a confine of a certain regulation or policy, I think it's also expedient that we have the same happening online. So like you said, regulation would actually have to give more room for innovation and not to restrict people. But if you're able to regulate to a large extent, you're able to say, this is how you operate and don't trespass, and especially breach on human rights. And that counts in that regard, we'll be touching on human rights and digital rights. And in saying that, how do we have developing and least developed countries actually play in Industry 4.0? One where we've had very popular in this space, or since the buzz about the fourth industrial revolution came about, is the word pivoting. And when you say pivoting, it's still standing on the second specific objectives of the African Digital Strategy, where we want to make people digitally empowered. The pivoting here means a gradual shift from just digitally skilling people to making people digitally literate. Now, the Industry 4.0 has come in a time where we're also using the Web 2.0, people are content creators and people are doing more things digitally. So if you want to move from that part where we just have people being digitally skilled to being digitally literate, we're able to have people use technologies, operate online, just beyond using technology as a space or as another thing, by using it as a tool. So if you want people to understand and be able to operate in this fourth industrial revolution, coming from the angle of the digitally empowering people, who move from just giving them skills that just gives them a bit of skills to do normal things online, but letting them understand the technologies behind how they can also build on those skills, even for job creation, even for development. It goes just beyond using it. And if you want to look into what the Web 4.0, the Industry 4.0 does for us, it's allowing people to make processes efficient, to be at the forefront of development with technology.
Yes.
And not,
yes, I agree with you, Lily. So right. I want to quickly ask you a question. You know, being in Hackathon Lab, well, will you support an African Day or week of coding? African Coding Day or week?
Okay, so let me tell you what happens at our annual hackathon competitions. Okay. So the hackathon is just one of the big conference. And hackathons, for people who are not familiar with the word, is a coined word which means a hacking competition. When we say hacking, let's move from the idea of wrongful access to things and to thinking innovatively. Just the normal or the basic meaning of hacking is to find ways around a thing. So what we bring to people to do is we bring them to deliberate around a particular topic. So the 2017 theme for the Hackler Foundation, our hackathon, was unpacking the fourth industrial revolution. And it was interesting to see what people did with technology to be able to solve health issues, health problems, transport problems, education, and more. And we saw that people were actually there because they had an idea and could find somebody to pair with to work on. And we had mentors there who were able to tell them this is doable. What happens with technology is sometimes we feel we know the problem and so don't involve people in the development process and end up having technologies that are shelved. But to be able to be very realistic in a continent where even access to infrastructure and development of infrastructure is still a bit behind, we have to be very realistic and see which exactly yields the result. You don't bring in smart cities when we don't have smart transportation, when there's not the basic foundation of roads, the road system is not really established. There's no electricity, there's no access to internet and all. So from that start, we tackle the issue at the hackathons from the discussions on what is and what can be, and we create in an idealistic way to see what if we make a projection for the future? How can things change? And then we have people building for the future. Because when we talk about the future, it's actually here, except that it catches up with us and we have no other option but to buy in, like what COVID did to us. So people would normally shy away from taking course models online. They want to be there in person. And when you had no option, it had to work for you. So people have now moved from just understanding what is and the wild thing people are talking in the tech space to actually being a part of it, because people are working tirelessly to make people know that the technology we are talking about isn't to replace anybody, isn't to replace any process, but to give us the idea to give us the tools to augment the efforts we do humanly. So if you have access to healthcare in a certain region, because there are many and doctors cannot, and we don't have so many doctors, maybe you can have one computer or a system there that people are able to interface with a doctor elsewhere. So there's the issue of solving under-resourced and understaffed, because technology is facilitating that. And if you want the space where this can happen, building from capacity building, digitally empowering people, helping them understand, not just being digitally skilled, literate, understanding the idea behind it, being secured. And this comes with being secure, the privacy. So you're on a space and you understand everything that can happen in there. Yes, and I think, who knows, these two parts, getting the infrastructure right, getting skills right, and building the skills together, we are heading somewhere as a continent. Absolutely.
Absolutely. You really caught the vision. You caught the vision. You are the youth, so tomorrow it belongs to you. You know, I can see Ajidola is smiling because we are moving out very soon. So, and you are coming up. So we're happy that you already have the concept in mind. The technologies to help, to scale, to solve the problem, identify future issues. And Industry 4.0 is about the future. Excellently put. But just to note again that you are also canvassing, maybe that should be scaled to the continental level. Maybe AU could also be a part of that or something, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
It's great. Okay, so we just call on Dr. Kosi. Dr. Kosi, are you there? The government, what is your government thinking with regard to Industry 4.0? Is that why you are saying that everything must be optimized, for all access, infrastructural access, maybe for health, for electricity, for communication, and so on and so forth?
Okay, thank you. The Industry 4.0, the first challenge I saw in that is the control of data. The control of data. The control of data. When you show me the person who are managing your data, I will show you who are decided for you, for your development. That is the very big challenge you have today. Is it possible for us to enter the emerging technology alone, like that, like government alone, like that? Not yet, not possible. Cooperation is important. Is for that we make liberalization. But to make good liberalization, we need a good legislation. When we don't have the policy makers on the same table with the legislation, is not good. People also can make contribution. Civil society can make contribution. Private sector people also can make contribution to show the way is important. Because this new way is open for all. Is multi-stakeholder approach, discussion for everything before take the law is very important. In our cyberspace now, the access to job is changing. Everything is changing. For example, when we talk to e-commerce, to be profitable, we need a good law on the table. That law cannot be taken by a parliamentarian alone. It's important to have private sector people inside, civil society inside, and also decision maker on the same table to see what is good, what is not good, how to change. When I need to pay something physically or I need to pay online, what kind of tax I need to pay? Is it the same thing? What is the benefit for me to go online if I don't have in this area geolocalization of customer correctly? When I send the thing, how can I put it to the customer directly? It's very difficult for us. It's for citizen, the startup are working on that. It's important for them to continue to help government and to make geolocalization of people conveniently, correctly, to move to the e-commerce area for a better way for them.
Okay, very good, very good. Geolocation system. There are some African countries that have gotten this through. At least I know in Nigeria, it's quite easy now to locate anyone, by and large. Jumia delivers pretty well, Konga. So maybe this call for South-South collaboration, right? So maybe more collaboration across the West Coast and then also East Coast. So is this an open invitation for collaboration, Dr. Kosi?
Yeah. I'm coming. I told you in the beginning that I'm coming for ministry event. It's for identity. It's for digital identity for West Africa. This is something we need for all Africa. The identity of people. It's important for e-commerce, for example. It's important to access to move to service.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Kosi. Do you have a data protection regulation, like maybe what they have in Kenya, like Jerry talked about, and also in Nigeria?
Yeah, we have law for that. We have
the
law
data
for
protection.
Yeah, and we have agency also who work on
that. Agency to tackle that. So that's good. So that is a good infrastructure, regulatory infrastructure in place. And for other needs, I think audience are listening, and I'm sure they will be able to jump into those opportunities. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kosi. Let me now move to Dr. Nena Jufo. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Luffy, and thank you, Dr. Kosi, for talking about laws again. I want to say that the problem in Africa is not an overly regulatory system, but in Africa, we hate accountability, we hate transparency. In the EU, there's virtually a directive for almost everything, and things are working. And so if regulations empower technology regulators, it is the same legislation that can also hold them accountable. Legislation can also talk about enforcement. It's just one thing is to empower. If you empower without a process, an accountable process or a transparent process of accountability, then efforts at empowerment will be futile sometimes. So it is more about a huge problem or a distorted understanding of the normative framework, if you like. And also this gap, and I always talk about this lack of conceptual clarity and a gap in holding people accountable and being transparent. But that aside, Now, in terms of job creation, benefit to citizens, economic survivability, I believe that these things are very fundamental to development. And again, I'll go back to law because we already have a ground norm in terms of development in Africa. Africa is the only region in the world where the right to development is a binding right. Now, you have the Declaration on the Right to Development, which is not binding, but Africa is the only region where development is a binding right. Now, what have we done with it? What, in terms of accountability, it talks about cooperation. In fulfilling development, it talks about cooperation, which can be beneficial when we talk about digital cooperation in terms of the question you've asked Dr. Lufi. If you go back to the framework of the right to development, Article 3, Article 4, all this talk about cooperation, but what have we done with it in terms of accountability? Have we held leaders accountable? We are being empowered in terms of this legislation. Rules are being provided for, but what have we done in terms of accountability? Now, as far back as the 1970s, when we had the New World Information and Communication Order, I wasn't even born. African states were talking about cooperation as well. And one of the things they asked for was cooperation for greater access to scientific and technological information, as far back as then, but we're still here. So let's move away from just laws, regulations, and I agree with Abdul Hakim to a great extent. What should we move towards? Let's look at a people-centered approach I talked about before. And we can look at a human rights-based approach rather than just laws. And what is specific to this human rights-based approach is accountability. It is equality, it is inclusion, it is transparency, it is implementation.
Excellent.
Those are very important. So let's integrate norms, standards, and principles of human rights system into these plans, into these policies, into these processes of digital cooperation, but fundamentally with a focus of benefiting citizens. Let's give benefits on the basis of human rights consideration. It also means that a right-based approach will, encourage state actors and even non-state actors, to broaden a potential of partnership focused on the basis of not just accountability, but equality on the basis of no hierarchy. Everybody should be included equally. And lastly, as well, we should think about policies, regulations in terms of addressing inequality, discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion as basic and fundamental issues too. In that way, when we think about all these issues, we will then focus as well on accountability, on transparency. I think there are two fundamental issues that are lacking when even we talk about legislation in Africa and all of that.
Brilliant, brilliant. So Dr. Ajufo, can we say that you support that government should really transform to e-government? Absolutely.
Absolutely. We can't leapfrog into those stages as it is in other, jurisdictions, but, absolutely. I'm a supporter of e-governance. And when I talked about, access to public information, these are one of the issues when we talk about, thriving digital economies, thriving digital inclusion. E-governance will be a basis to allow for digital inclusion in those terms. Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. That's good. So let me bring in Jerry now before we open the floor for question and answer. Jerry.
Thank you once again. Again, I'll go back to there's been a conversation about and correctly so. In Africa, we are overregulated. I agree very much. One of the things that made M-Pesa a global phenomenon in Africa, because it originated from Kenya, is and we've very much appreciate the government and the central bank reached back then in 2006-7, and the regulators then decided to tone down and allow technology to take over. it has become a global phenomenon. One of the things that has been quite frustrating, you see economies like Ethiopia with 100 million people, Nigeria 200 million, but you find that financial penetration, financial inclusion is not very high. Why? Because of regulation. Again, it is this is very, very simple around digital consumption and technology, because with the pandemic and with the consumption and the need for consumption of technology across board, we have this opportunity to lobby and encourage regulators and the government to facilitate this penetration and this utilization of digital channels. An example, perhaps, I lead a group of executives in East Africa who we call ourselves Digital Innovation Group, and we are benchmarking with the European standards on how best to influence policy, government policy around the digital space. We have even gotten much involved in revenue authority tax on taxing digital revenue and generation of revenue around. There are many people who are many people and many enterprises who have been openly making generating revenue and making money on the over the internet, and yet have not fully been appreciated by the collection and revenue authorities as to how to handle even this digital revenue. So we played a very, very big role in facilitating and in benchmarking with our
okay,
mutual across the globe to get best practice, to benchmark on best practice as to how best the revenue authorities can actually utilize these resources over the internet.
Great.
So yes,
great.
it's about enablement, but it's also about facilitation. It's about enablement. It's also about facilitation, so that the rest of the population can appreciate this platform we call the internet. Thank you.
Okay, great, Jerry. So in a nutshell, from what you have submitted, you are underscoring North-South partnership, right? And you're also saying there's a lot of revenue to be made here, a lot of revenue, and then they need to be used properly, of course. But the first thing you first mentioned, Dr. Ajivo said, you said maybe that we are over-regulated. Dr. Ajivo said, no, we're not really over-regulated because there are so many regulations in the EU, but things are working properly. So the challenge is transparency and accountability to really ensure we're in compliance, so to speak. And then we said, okay, maybe there should be e-government master plan, and people should follow, government should implement those master plan. And somebody on the chat talked about there is opportunity for partnership through the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is, that's very good. So we believe that is a very solid platform, because trade it's all about trade, okay? Exchange of goods, services, and then we need to harmonize them properly. We have a few minutes more to go, and I'm looking out to my moderator. Tola, do we have any question or any comments right there that we need to respond to? Adetola might need to be given the right to speak or so. No question for now. Okay, all right. No question for now. So let's do more interaction. Let's do more interaction with the robust submission we have presented. Well, the laws are there, okay? The regulations are there. In fact, it is said that they will even have them in a flexible format. So everything is in the hand of, say, the government. Law is in the hand of government. The regulation is in the hand of government. In fact, government controls the largest chunk of national budget of the resources. Yes. So what then do others do? I see some organizations like civil society canvass for freedom of information, like in Nigeria Freedom of Information Act. We see some organizations like Budget It following up on appropriation bill. Has this project been implemented? Has this been done or not? I see Tracker also tracking implementation of budgetary items, action lines, and what have you. So tell me from your various perspective, what you are doing to hold government accountable. What are you doing to hold government accountable? Who wants to go first? Dr. Nena.
I'll wait for.
Okay. So maybe, so let the lady go first. We like her teeth, you know. Yeah, let the lady go first. Then Dr.
I would let Abdul Hakim go first.
Okay, you defer to your chairman. Okay, chairman, yes. Over to you. That's African culture now.
Yeah, which we have to change. The chairman actually last. Let others speak first. Very quickly, just to I saw in the chat. You know, for you, if you want to drive knowledge development, really, you have to have a significant level of transparency and accountability, whether it is in the public sector or the private sector. And one of the members of the chat had talked about the challenge of the high price of data in Uganda. And I think this is a problem across Africa. And for me, really, the high price of bandwidth in any part of Africa is a function of supply and demand. And so what we have to do as a society is really over supply. So which means that whether it is legislation or regulation or the environment has to encourage the providers, the suppliers to overproduce. So that once you have more increased supply, then naturally your cost will begin to lower because you have more to amortize. You are able to basically discount your product or service. And I can tell you from a practical perspective, I also sit on the board of an infrastructure company that actually lays long distance and metro fiber. And particularly within our own environment, things like right-of-way costs, traversing multiple jurisdictions, inconsistency. We all talk about policy inconsistencies, but the inconsistencies are more than just policies. It's actually implementation of even enforcement is very inconsistent. And forgive me, audience, but let me tell you, from a business perspective, business can handle corruption. Quite bluntly, corruption is, the cost of corruption is passed on to the consumer. From a business perspective, what business cannot handle is inconsistency, whether it is inconsistency of policy or inconsistency of implementation. Now, if I may go back to the challenge of policy, many of us have heard that in Africa and places like Nigeria, we have wonderful policies, but poor implementation. And I would disagree. I've been involved in a lot of policy development, and I can tell you from experience, our policies are not well worded. The ideas may be sound, There may be gold and diamonds inside, but we put too much English, too much grammar. And so that those policy, the beauty of the policy, for example, a typical policy you will see 80 pages, 100 pages, 150 pages. Whereas in other climes, you may see a similar policy of 10 pages. The point I want to put across, when you are developing a policy, whether government or business, first of all, the intent of the policy is for it to be implemented. In order for it to be implemented, it must be understood. In order for it to be understood, it must be read. In order for it to be read, it must be short and simple, succinct. And so I find that a lot of our policy, and I'm guilty, I'm in a glass house here, so forgive me, but I find a lot of our policy development processes are developed by people who are maybe too educated, forgetting that the person, yes, the minister may read the policy, but it's actually the assistant director, the deputy director, the principal officer who actually has to extract from the policy and develop implementable projects. So simplicity, I think, is one of the big challenges we have. If I may just give one moment, sir, just give a quick shout out to Prudence. We have seen her podcast and we are following it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that deep insight. There is a question here which I also want us to look at. Officially, we are to stop at 12:10, but we started maybe 5 minutes late or thereabout. So maybe we may still have 5 minutes. Said with regard to data, personal data, that's been collected by device manufacturers away from Africa. Okay. And then they'll expose some of this data without our content. So what are we doing about it? So what can we do to address this?
Develop our own equivalent solutions. That's the long-term solution.
Okay, how about collaboration? How about international agreement or something that could ensure that those people can be prosecuted?
Possibly, but they own the platform. The data is stored in their jurisdiction, not ours. So we need our own platform to store our. It has to be within our jurisdiction. Sorry, Nena, you are the lawyer. Please let me let you.
Yes.
Talk.
Okay. So Nena. Okay. Yes.
I think has validly captured this issue of, but then in as much as we talk about, digital sovereignty and all that, in this era, that saying data will remain in our jurisdiction and in their jurisdiction, it wouldn't continue to suffice. It's not traditional jurisdiction anymore. And I think, Chair, you said it, you captured it very well when you said, now internet or cyberspace is not fixed or is not geographically proximate to any location, if you like. And digital cooperation here is very important. And that is why, allow me, when we talk about data protection, allow me to go back to the Malabo Convention. Sorry, I'm a lawyer, I can't deviate from my stand with, laws and all that. The Malabo Convention is there. And I think it gives African states a benchmark, a minimal, basis to have an understanding of data protection laws and all that. Let's even start from there. There is always a process of amendment. For example, what Abdul Hakim talks about, it is not then the policy that is the problem. Probably Africa, we don't employ experts. You go for agreements, like you talk about, Dr. Lufuye, international treaties and agreements. Sometimes the diplomats don't even understand what the policy they are signing on to is about. And I spoke about it earlier, a lack of conceptual clarity. So I say things the way they are. Permit me, we need to rather think about who are we employing to draft policies that are drafting a bookload of policy. It is not about just having the policies. And then you asked earlier about accountability. Unfortunately, it's a problem in the international system. It's even a challenge holding states accountable. You have a system of reservation which allows states to treat obligations as if it's an a la carte menu. I want the chicken wings, but I don't want the sauce on it. And that is not how, we should treat issues in terms of accountability. But then advocacy groups become very important. That is why we're talking about a multi-stakeholder approach. For example, the African Digital Rights Initiative, they're doing a good work in calling out states and trying to hold them accountable. So let's advocacy group, IGOs, NGOs head towards, account. As that is, we cannot have a right of justiciability in terms of holding states accountable. It will not happen.
Yes.
It will happen. So advocacy groups and campaigns will help for now in holding states.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it is gaining some traction here in Nigeria, really. And I would like to use the opportunity to commend all the advocacy group, all the business groups, that are helping government in one way or the other. Policy is very important. We should not underrate policy, underscore the importance of regulation. Without policy, without direction, policy provides direction, regulation provides direction, guided pathway, where to go. So that is why it's so important. Everybody should be interested in policies. Don't say there are too many policies. Don't say there are too many regulations. Don't say, oh, we don't want this, but it should be properly customized, fine-tuned to serve the people. All is about our people, the African people, the people we want. Somebody asked a question, can a divide in Africa enable economic viability in the continent? There is beauty in diversity, really. And that is what we are working on to optimize our diversity for the best outcome for our people. We have the great potentials, we have the great opportunities. And that is why we commend AU and ECA for being consistent concerning opportunity to rob mines. And we just plead with our government to be more proactive and also be more involved in what we do. And for the hackathon people, the coders, we need more coders because the industry 4.0 is about coding, really. We need to have more people doing the coding, providing local content, and then tackling our issues and turning the devices, okay? Programming the devices, devices, and also localizing the manufacturing of the devices that will serve our various sectors. Well, I've not seen any other question, and so I will wrap up at this point as I really go ahead to thank our beloved panelists, very erudite and articulate panelists, Abdulhakeem Ajijola, the chair of AU-CSWG, the African Union Cyber Security Working Group, your chair, group of experts, Lily Edinam, thank you so much, of ACLAP Foundation. I want to thank Dr. Kusi Messino, very being open and transparent, talking about what the government should be doing. We appreciate those comments. And Dr. Nena for your very, very pungent points. Regulation, we cannot be tired of it, but it must be smart. It must reflect the need of the people. And then calling on the civil society to do their part. Jerry Sikuli, thank you so much. There is a lot of resources revenue government can make. You have pointed that out, and we appreciate your point. The market is huge. The market is there, and let us tap it for the benefit of our people. So on this note, I want to say thank you again, and thank you for all the listeners and all those that have raised comments, and those that will go forward to implement some of these things we have discussed. On this note, I'll say thank you again, and back to you, Adil Suleiman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gibson. I think you guys need to take a group photo before you can turn on your cameras so that we can have a group photo. By the way, I tried to raise the bar for you guys so high, but you didn't disappoint. So great job. And I really look forward to the summary and key takeaways from this session. It has been really a pleasure, listening to you guys, and it was a fantastic session. Okay, so the group photo, please. Are we? Francis, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself so that you can hear what you have to say?
All right. Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Going. Say cheese. All right. On. All right. Thanks. Photo taking.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take 30 minutes break. And I think the best is yet to come. I think we have two very interesting session coming up at 11:40 UTC after we take our short break. The first session number 3 will be creating a sustainable digital taxation regime in Africa. The session is going to be moderated by Dr. Alison Gilworth, the Executive Director of Research ICT Africa. We are looking forward to this session. Let's have a break, and we are going to reconvene in around 20 minutes or so. Thank you very much.